Thomas Dehent wears the yellow jersey of overall leader at the Criterium du Dauhine. He has led since day one, and he's in the peloton right now with that man Richie Porte, who is the highest placed of the overall favorites in the general classification. They're all chasing a six-man breakaway that is just about to start the biggest climb of the race so far. After 5 days on flat and undulating roads, it is finally time to climb for real at the 69th edition of the Criterium du Dauhine. Hi everyone, Steve Schlanger with Christian Vandevelde, and Thomas Dehent has led this race since winning on stage number 1. But by his own admission, he figures to lose that leader's yellow jersey today on the first big alpine stage of the race. Currently has a 27-second margin over Richie Porte, who sits in second place. And Christian, only a few climbs on the menu today, but the biggest one they've done so far in this entire race is staring them right in the face.
It is staring them right in the face. Pretty much a flat day for the most part, apart from the category 3 and 4 right before the Mont du Chat or the Cat Mountain. And it doesn't get any more real than that climb. Look at the statistics there. 8.7 kilometers, 10.3%. They're right at the bottom of this, right about to tackle that Mont du Chat.
Well, this was just a short time ago. The battle for position leading into the climb and a crash on some narrow roads.
That's always what happens right before the bottom of the last climb. Everyone's pushing and shoving, trying to jockey for position to be at the front right before the Mont du Chat. A lot of times, ironically, some of these guys who do end up crashing would never be in the front either way. Creates a little bit of chaos. A lot of these riders trying to scurry their way back into the peloton before they're just going to get dropped anyways.
A frantic chase to try and catch back on before the start of the climb. And now we pick up the action on the lower slopes of the Mont du Chat as the six-man breakaway, the signature move of the entire stage, starting to come apart. 6 riders at one point had a lead of over 8 minutes. It's come down to now under 3 minutes, and the chase currently being led behind by the team of Richie Porte. That is the BMC squad. Porte sitting just 27 seconds back of the yellow jersey that belongs to Thomas Dehent. But Porte, the best placed of the true general classification contenders that figure to battle it out for the overall race win going into the weekend.
Team BMC on the front, driving this very hard. Right before we came on air, we saw AG2R on the front, looking towards their rider, Romain Bardet, who won a very similar stage 2 years ago into Pralou. And let's not forget that the service course of the AG2R team more or less is right at the finish line. So that is one team that will definitely know this climb. And that's another aspect of this climb. Not too many of these riders have ever even ridden over this, let alone raced it. I know that Richie Porte came out here and did some recon on Friday. Obviously, Romain Bardet. Maybe a handful of other people, but I would say the majority of these riders have not been up this climb.
Some call it the hardest climb in the entire country. It is 8.7K at 10.3%, and about halfway up, it gets close to 15% in terms of the slope. And it's another hot one out there, 80 degrees, sun baking these riders. So they will certainly feel the effects of the gradient and the weather as the race proceeds. And this is, in effect, a dress rehearsal for Stage 9 of the Tour de France that will also tackle this climb. The last 50K of today's stage at the Dauphine mirrors that of Stage 9 at the Tour.
It's a great trait of the Dauphine. You always come to this race knowing that you're going to get a sneak peek of what's to come at the Tour de France. But look at this breakaway right now. A strong breakaway. Had over 8.5 minutes at one point in time. Now 2.5 at the bottom of this climb. I was thinking that looking at Serge Powell's, I would think he's easily the best climber out of that breakaway group. And with 3 minutes and all downhill from the top to the finish line, I think he would have had a chance. But now watching this gap come down, I don't know. I don't think it looks so good. But right there's Thomas Dehent. He looks like he's coming to grips with his pace right now. The yellow jersey is getting dropped from the front group.
BMC still riding at the front. This climb being used in the Dauphine for the first time since 1966. It's only been used at the Tour de France one other time. That was 1974. The only difference between the Dauphine and the Tour's use of this stage, today they're cutting off about a dozen K at the end. When they come back for Stage 9 of the Tour, they'll have an additional 12K or so of flat roads at the end leading into the Finnish town of Chambéry. and say goodbye to the yellow jersey. Thomas DeHent now coming off the back of the field.
Thomas DeHent's a good climber, obviously. We've been saying this the entire week. And let's not forget that in 2012, he was 3rd place overall in the Giro d'Italia. And this climb right here is a climb that really looks a lot like the Motorola, a day where Thomas DeHent actually won the stage on the Stelvio. The Motorola was a penultimate climb that day, but not to be today. Thomas DeHent, and he did say this, like you said in the pre-show, he was expecting to come off the back today and lose that yellow jersey.
It is a small group up here led by BMC. And you start to think of the favorites now with Thomas DeHent no longer a factor. You have Richie Porte, the best placed of the top GC riders. Alejandro Valverde starts the day 24 seconds behind Porte. Contador 35 seconds back of Porte. Chris Froome an additional 2 seconds behind Contador. And then Andrew Talansky, Simon Yates, Dan Martin, Fabio Aru, Jakob Fuglsang, Romain Bardet, they are all over a minute behind Richie Porte. So that's kind of where things stand among the favorites.
It's like Tony Galopin as well. A little too steep for Tony. Tony's good climber in his own right. He needs some medium mountains when he goes on the attack, which you've seen him do many times in the previous Tour de France. Has always seems to come up with a stage win here and there.
And something to consider too, as you take a look at the rider from Cofidis. That is Anthony Turgi, part of the breakaway, but now starting to suffer, the 23-year-old. And now that just leaves 3 at the front, led by Olivier Nesson of AG2R, and now a Movistar rider going off the front of the main field. Alejandro Valverde, their team leader, 3rd in the general classification as the day started, sitting 24 seconds behind Richie Porte. Maybe a little leg tester.
I think Alejandro's on serious form, getting 3rd place earlier. Looks like we got Ian Boswell, the American rider, going off the back here. This just shows you how steep it is. Let's not forget that Ian Boswell was in the hunt and Mombaldi not so long ago in the Amgen Tour of California and not being able to stay with the front riders. But here we go with the Movistar going on the attack, and look like Valverde on the right-hand side. They're looking at his chops, and there he goes, right up the road.
He's coming up the left-hand side of the road, looking to link up with his teammate, and let's see what kind of reaction this may cause behind.
I think he's going to go right by his teammate. Maybe a little yell. He almost had to stop pedaling coming up to his back wheel.
Valverde was involved in a crash earlier on the stage. Wasn't anything significant. Doesn't appear to be too bothered by it. And now getting a little bit of a gap here. This climb will summit with 15.5K left to go, and then a very treacherous descent. It is steep. There's some hairpin turns. The high rate of speed is going to be a factor. Valverde, an excellent descender, so they don't want to give him too much of a leash to work with here.
No way. I mean, that descent alone, they're at the top of the Cat Mountain, is 5,000 feet, and it's only about 750 at the bottom, so it's a big descent, very tricky. You see it's very wooded as well, so your optics are always changing. Sometimes you have bright sun and then you go into the shade, so it's really hard to really ascertain what that corner looks like, especially when you're going 50 miles an hour.
Back here, Warren Barguil, still recovering from a hip fracture. Doesn't seem to be too displeased about getting dropped from the field. Probably expecting it.
Oh, look at this guy go. I mean, he's been on form all year long. Alejandro Valverde showing his class yet again off the front. It looked like Richie Porte only had Nicholas Roach left on his team doing some pace work. But you know what, this kind of climb, Steve, pacing really isn't going to come into effect that much. It's so steep. The speeds are so low, even though these guys are absolutely flying up this climb. You really don't get too much of a draft, but the speed that Alejandro is going, you definitely begin to draft right now.
Well, they've disappeared from view behind him. Are you surprised nobody went with him?
I'm a bit surprised, but it's a long climb. This is easily a half-an-hour climb for the best riders in the world. So they have a long way to go, and some of these gradients start to get even steeper in the middle, reaching 14, 15% at times. I mean, you have prolonged kilometers at 12%, 13%. So I mean, I did the math earlier. The last 7 kilometers is average of 11.2%. It's really hard to see when you see a rider like Alejandro Valverde flying up this climb, making it look like it's flat. But let me tell you, even walking up this climb would be hard.
And these are other riders dropped at the back. As Yanni Brajkovic of the Bahrain team.
Past winner of this race.
And now here's Valverde passing one of the riders from the breakaway. That is Thierry Houpon of the Delco Marseille squad, the French rider who was the first to come off the six-man group. And so Valverde goes by him. Now, the interesting thing with Valverde, he doesn't typically like the long, steep climbs.
No, I would agree with that. And that makes me really concerned of how strong he really is going right now. Going on the attack this early on a long climb that is usually not his style. He usually waits and then does an epic attack usually towards the end. And especially what you brought up with how good his descending skills are.
And then you think about it, even if you do catch up to him and you can hang with him on the descent, if he comes to the finish line with a small group, he's usually the fastest finisher.
Oh, yeah. I'd say 99 out of 100 times he's the fastest guy out of a small group of climbers. I caught a glimpse of an Orica rider look like it. I don't know if that was Chavez trying to go across.
Talansky was at the back of that group too in the green for Cannondale. And it doesn't seem like they're all that far back from Valverde right now.
No, it's bringing them back slowly but surely.
An Astana rider, though, looks like trying to accelerate out of the group.
Look like a Lotto rider as well.
And look how small this group is at the bottom of the screen.
Nobody there. It's still Nico Roach, though, from Team BMC doing the work for Richie Porte. Richie Porte on the road most likely is the leader right now of this Dauphiné.
Well, that is an Astana rider. Kind of looks like Fabio Aru.
I would agree with that. It's definitely Aru, and it looks like Chavez as well, the Orica rider with him.
So they're trying to get across to Valverde. Still some riders up the road from the original breakaway of 6. And they are a minute and a half ahead of what is a very small main field. And Valverde and these 3 other riders just ahead of that main field, and that is Fabio Aru in the turquoise colored jersey for Astana.
I'm not 100% certain that's Chavez, but definitely an Orica rider, and then a Lotto rider, and then of course Nicolas Roach behind from Team BMC, tapping out that tempo for Richie Porte.
So a 4-man group here, just getting clear of the reduced main field. Still other riders in the breakaway up the road as we're on the signature climb of the day. On the first beyond classification climb of the Dauphiné this year, the Mont du Chat. And these are our 2 leaders, Nason and Bettiol. 20K left to go on the stage, and that's 4.5K left to go to the top of the climb. And they have just passed the steepest part where it gets up to 15%, but still narrow roads, averaging over 10% all the way. And this is that group with Alejandro Valverde, just ahead of the main field, it looks like. Oh, no, this is actually at the back of that main field. Simon Yates getting dropped. Now, very interesting that Yates, who had a good time trial and stands, as the day started, 103 behind Richie Porte among the overall contenders, is losing contact.
Jakob Fulsang up there in the front from Team Astana. Haven't really got to speak at all about him. We've been talking a lot about Fabio Aru. Fabio Aru doing that first attack from Astana. I think that looks like Fabio now back in the peloton behind Richie Porte.
And then Romain Bardet is back there for AG2R, just at the head of that group. Chris Froome is there for Team Sky.
Kwiatkowski right there for Team Sky in the front right there. So now it looks like all the general contenders
Contador's
are kind
here.
of looking at each other right now, with Contador looking at each other.
Contador's number 41, Chris Froome number 1. And Froome said at the start of the day that he was disappointed in the time trial, learned a lot that he can apply going forward as we have an attack off the front of this group here.
And that's Luis Menkes going off the front there from UAE, Team Emirates.
South African accelerating a bit as you get a look at where the leaders are on this climb. First time they've gone up an HC climb, an hors de category climb in this race, the third of 3 climbs that are categorized here today. As Jakob Fuglsang again for the Astana squad with the unzipped jersey.
There's been a lot of to and from coming from the Astana team about who's going to be the leader going into the Tour de France. They had given that leadership role to Jakob Fuglsang earlier, but then Fabio Aru didn't do the Giro d'Italia, and they wanted to give it to him. Astana being a Kazakhstan team, but definitely more of an Italian team. So I see how they're going to push towards Fabio, but maybe this may be a little bit of Jakob pounding his fist on the table saying how good he actually is, and he looks great right now. If he could ride up these kind of steep climbs at that kind of pace, he's obviously in good form.
Last two riders from the six-man breakaway, Bettiol and Nason at the front of the stage. Now Olivier Nason, 26-year-old for AG2R, leading that twosome. Back here, number 41, that's Alberto Contador. Off the right shoulder of number 1, Chris Froome, and there's an attack off the front of the group from Astana. That might be Fabio Aru, who accelerated away.
Yeah, that's definitely Aru going up the road.
And no response from the others.
I think Dan Martin's down there now in the front. Yeah, that's Dan Martin as well. Maybe Romain Bardet.
And Menkes just in front of them, leading the trio. Talansky, number 151, coming up to the back of the group.
This is where it really starts hurting bad. When you start looking at each other, with all the general classification contenders start looking at each other, slowing that pace and accelerating. These accelerations absolutely kill you. So Andrew Talansky, knowing his body very well, will try to absorb all these accelerations, let them go, try to bring them back when they let up, let them go. Probably not on top form, just trying to get all that form. He did win in Montbaldi a couple weeks ago at the Tour of California. This is definitely a different animal over here in the Dauphiné.
All right, so we have Romain Bardet at the front in the brown and white for AG2R. We've got Dan Martin in the blue, Mikhail Kwiatkowski for Team Sky in the dark colors. Fabio Aru is there in the turquoise.
And I think Jakob Fuglsang is ahead of them on the road, because I've not seen him yet. Fabio Aru flew across that gap up to these guys. Dan Martin looking good. Dan Martin's another guy who packs quite a punch in a sprint.
Now, interesting that Chris Froome and Richie Porte, along with Alberto Contador, are in the next group right behind these. And then we have Alejandro Valverde, along with Fuglsang, who is up the road just in front of this group. Doesn't seem like they're separated by all that much time, but a lot of the favorites right now getting separated on the road, leading to the top of the climb. And here's Aru once again with an acceleration. Bardet moves over to try and get on his wheel. Boy, Aru coming back from that knee injury that kept him out of the Giro d'Italia, and looking pretty strong on this climb.
Looking very strong. He was definitely a question mark coming here, but he sounded like he was quite confident. Like having confidence and actually having the legs are two different animals. So Aru's looking great. He did a good time trial. Not a fantastic, but a very good time trial for himself. Obviously, Aru having a lot of form. Perfect climb for him.
And another Movistar attack. And then it's Richie Porte trying to respond, then Chris Froome behind, then Alberto Contador. Aru coming up to the back of the Bora rider here. Bardet is still further back down the road. Dan Martin, Kwiatkowski. And this is at the very front. Olivier Nason of AG2R. He has dropped Alberto Bettiol, but the interesting now, dynamically for Nason, you got to think that he at some point might drop back and help Bardet, right?
I would assume so. Then that would make sense. I mean, you're not going to be able to go for the stage win. Might as well be of some kind of help. Looks like Kwiatkowski, speaking of some help, is giving his team leader Chris Froome a lot of help here. Looking back, that means I think that Chris Froome is hurting right now. Yeah, Alberto Contador right behind him.
And Fabio Aru looking the best of anyone on the climb.
Agreed. And there's Serge Pauwels. This is the guy that I thought who would be up at the front and maybe even going for the stage win with 3 minutes, but it looks like he's going to be absorbed by the peloton, or what's left of the peloton, really quick. Aru put on a display here right now, though. I'm really interested to see where Jakob Fuglsang, have we missed him in the back, or is he still ahead right now of Fabio Aru?
And back here, right, Menkes, number 181, is back with this group. He had attacked earlier. Chris Froome just ahead of Alberto Contador. Those signature styles. Froome with the rocking shoulders, head looking down. Contador up on the pedals. There's Valverde on the left-hand side of the road for Movistar in the green and blue. Then Romain Bardet, brown and white of AG2R, as Kwiatkowski finally pops here. So that's all he can do to help Chris Froome, who's now on his own. All right, there's Fuglsang right there. So he has just gone past the Cannondale rider, Alberto Bettiol, and Fabio Aru about to come up to the back of Jakob Fuglsang. So the two teammates about to link up, but two guys who could both be fighting for the team leadership role at the Tour de France when they hit this climb in July.
Yeah, no one's backing off from one or the other, that's for sure. And both these guys could go down very quickly down the climb. I've seen Jakob do some spectacular descents in his day. Let's not forget he was a world champion at mountain biking once upon a time.
Look at Romain Bardet struggling a little bit here. A guy who knows this climb better than anybody. Trains on it, reconned it 1 week ago today. His team is based in the finishing town of today's stage. He's a great descender, so if he could climb up this ascent with some pace, he could take advantage of his descending skills. And among all the favorites, he needs to take more time than anybody. Starting the day 1:53 behind Richie Porte because of his poor time trial.
Yeah, I think that shows just his form right there, Steve. That poor time trial. I was very unimpressed with his time trial. I think maybe just lacking a little bit of form coming into the Tour de France right now, or coming to the end, the last couple of days of the Dauhine. Let's see if he can get better and better throughout the weekend. Now it looks like Alejandro Valverde is definitely paying for that earlier attack.
And Contador right behind him. Valverde.
Such a steep climb here. It's like doing leg press for a half an hour trying to make it up this climb. And then, of course, you suffer the whole way down, and then a death-defying descent with the terror all the way to the finish line.
So Bardet right behind Contador, who is right behind Valverde. And everybody needs to take time on Richie Porte. That's what you have to remember about the battle among the general classification contenders here. All right, Nason of AG2R, the last man at the front of the race from the original 6-man breakaway that at one point had over 8 minutes earlier today. Then the two Astana riders, Aru and Fuglsang, right behind him, about to catch him, just about 2 kilometers shy of the summit.
And it looks like the 3 Anglo riders, he has Richie Porte, Chris Froome, and Dan Martin. 3 riders right behind them, and then Bettiol from Cannondale from the breakaway getting absorbed.
Now, Chris Froome saying at the start of the stage he hoped to be the first to the top of the climb and then see where the race develops from there. Unlike some of the others, has not trained or reconned this climb. Said he looked at Google Earth to figure out some of the features. I would think Google Earth is maybe slightly different than actually riding it in a race, Christian.
It's a lot different, but you know, it is a tool that's used quite a bit. And a lot of times you actually use it in the morning in your team meeting, in the bus actually. Bring that up there. It's nice to see it one last time right before you get out there and race it yourself. But yes, no, you're right. 100 kilometers per hour on a descent you've never been on. There's nothing like actually riding your bike.
Headed towards the top of the signature climb of the race so far. The two Astana riders, Fuglsang and Aru, now at the front of the stage. The Criterium du Dauphiné climbing the Mont du Chat, the same climb that will be used on stage 9 at the Tour de France next month. Looking down right now on Richie Porte, a BMC in the red. Right behind him, Chris Froome. And now up the road, Fabio Aru, attacking and pulling ahead of his teammate Jakob Fuglsang. So Aru, the first man right now on the road. And the only man so far from the field of overall contenders to really show a sense of pace on the climb. Everybody else just kind of riding steady.
Aru's always showing a bit of panache out there. Whether he has it or not, always going on the attack, trying to show what he's actually got. A lot like Vincenzo Nibali. They look very similar on the bike as well. Looks like Dan Martin has also been dropped from that little group of Richie Porte and Chris Froome.
Top of the climb, just about 1K away. It's at 15.5K from the finish and in a very dangerous high-speed descent. Aru, a good descender, but one director estimated that you could go over the top of this climb with a 15-second lead and lose the stage by some 30 seconds. That's how difficult it is. And who wants to take the risk?
Yeah, it's one of the
big question.
It's one of those descents where it's really actually not that technical, but it's so crowded by all the trees there, you can't really hit. The line of sight is not that long. So when you're going 80, 90 kilometers per hour, 50 miles an hour, 55 on a road that's not really that nicely paved, I have to say that as well. The first 2/3 of this descent is not nice. He's similar to what you're seeing right here. Quite an ancient road, to be honest. A lot of chip and seal, a lot of patchwork. Not exactly an F1 course on the way down.
Second group on the road, or Richie Porte leading Chris Froome, and then Fuglsang right behind. Porte ahead of Froome by 37 seconds in the standings, and ahead of Fuglsang by 1:14 as the day started. Fabio Aru also a minute 13 behind Richie Porte as the day began. So Richie Porte very much in the driver's seat among the overall favorites here. And just steadily looking to reel in Fabio Aru.
Look at the cadence difference in Chris Froome. Chris Froome tapping out a cadence of over 9,500 RPM, going up a steep climb. That is very hard to do. Definitely more of an aerobic activity. Chris Froome, I think, is just going to get better and better. Didn't really perform so well, especially up to his standards in that time trial. Richie Porte getting the better of him by quite a margin. And that's why you see Richie Porte on the front. This is his jersey to win or lose here today.
And 500 meters to the summit. There's Alejandro Valverde, followed by Alberto Contador, number 41, and then number 11, Romain Bardet, also among the group of favorites. But they are the third group on the road behind the Froome, Porte, Vogelsong group. This is the leader, Fabio Aru.
I think Dan Martin might be in between those guys. So you have a group of about 7 or 8 guys up there on the front.
So Aru about to hit the summit of the climb, and then this group will follow next, led by Richie Porte. So Aru is up and over.
Here you go, fasten your seatbelts. Not going to take too long to get down this descent, but they are going to descend 4,200 feet in about 6.5 miles, 7 miles.
And that's not much of a gap that Aru has over that group with Porte, Froome, and Vogelsong. Here's Valverde. Accelerating, Contador behind, and then Romain Bardet, group number 3. Now they're a little further back. It's a closer margin between Aru and the Froome group than it is back to these 3. They have some work to do to make up that lost ground. And as picturesque as you can ask for in this region of southeastern France, Fabio Aru, first look at the descent. Leading the way, how much of a risk will he take? Can he maintain his margin?
Now these guys are finally up and over, so Fabio Aru is easily about 750 meters to a kilometer ahead of them.
All right, so Aru goes over first, followed by this group led by Richie Porte, and then the Valverde trio, as everyone is now on the descent to the Mont du Chat. High-speed descent off the Mont du Chat, the final climb on stage number 6 at the Dauhine. Richie Porte now at the back of this group, Chris Froome leading the way, Jakob Fuglsang in the middle. And they are chasing Fabio Aru, the leader up the road.
So Dan Martin is still out there. He's in between those 2 groups all by his lonesome. And it really is every man for themselves on this descent anyways. But it is always nice to have a motorcycle or somebody else in front of you to really see where you're going through these corners and see how much they're braking before you hit them. Because a lot of these guys, like I was saying before, they're going into this descent blind. They've never seen this before. Oh, it looks like Chris Froome is shutting down that gap to Fabio Aru very quickly. He had 11 seconds over the top. He's about to make contact right now. Chris Froome takes no prisoners on these descents.
Yeah, Chris Froome is a sneaky good descender. He has really improved his descending skills these last few years, hasn't he?
He certainly has. I mean, he talked to a lot of people who train with him, and this is what he descends like in training, taking serious risks on open roads. But I guess if you want to be able to race like that, you have to train like that as well.
So Froome is just about caught Aru here. And then it's Vogelsong and Richie Porte. These are the first 4 on the road.
Man, this is a very technical descent. It's more or less going down the same direction. But like I said before, your line of sight is not that long with all these trees. You really can't judge how hard this corner continues to, does it keep on bending hard? But this one finally looks like it's going to come hard all the way around and be a serious switchback. But a lot of those you can't really tell until you're actually in them.
So Chris Froome now at the front, the 2 Astana riders, Aru and Vogelsong behind, and then Richie Porte. Big picture here, Christian. How much time can be gained the rest of the way because it's downhill or flat the rest of the way to the finish? And Chris Froome, for instance, is 37 seconds behind Richie Porte, and he's in the same group.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Martin, for example, is in the middle here. He has no one around him, no one to really tell how fast or slow he's going, maybe not even a lead motorcycle in front of him. So that's a hard position to be in. At least Chris Froome has that car in front of him. He could see when the brake lights are coming on. He could see when they're not on. And you can see how the way they're going into those corners. So you can really judge how fast you're going through this. And considering that he took 11 seconds out of Fabio Aru, who is a good descender, in the first, 4 kilometers of descent, that means he could put in a lot of time on some of these guys on this descent.
Think he's going to get away from him?
I don't think he's going to get away from this group right here. It looks like everyone's staying within eyeshot. As long as you're there and you can see where he is, that's okay. But I'm thinking more about Dan Martin and those guys behind in the Valverde group. I think they're going to lose a lot of time. Chris Froome is putting on a downhilling clinic right now in the Mont du Chat.
Yeah, remember the last we saw in the Valverde group, it was Alejandro Valverde, Alberto Contador, and Romain Bardet. Dan Martin was just ahead of them.
Yeah, the Valverde group being that number 3 right there on the road. I think they will most likely catch Dan Martin, who's all by himself, probably halfway down this climb. And that group will get a little bit strong. There is a little bit of flat on the bottom before the finish line, but I think all the damage is going to be done before they get to that flat part.
Also some corners in the final few K to deal with. And Chris Froome really hitting the gas at the front of this group. And now this is back to what looks like the Valverde group. Yeah, that's Bardet at the back. And now back to the front group. Richie Porte just staying at the back.
Just chicane after chicane after chicane all the way down. Now we finally have some decent road surface again. Road surface towards the top was prehistoric and not funny to be throwing your bike in sideways into some of these corners you've never been in before, especially with the old road surface.
I guess Google Earth really did well for Chris Froome. The study session paid off because he is tackling this descent excellently. So trying to open up the gap, and we'll take you to the finish of stage 6 next. Looking down at our leaders, Chris Froome opening up a small gap on the descent to the Mont du Chat. And then one of the Astana riders right behind. You've got Fabio Aru and Jakob Fuglsang both there. Right behind Froome and just ahead of Richie Porte in that front group of 4.
It's actually Jakob ahead of Aru, and then Richie Porte on the wheel of Aru right there. A little bit of separation right there, as Chris Froome continues to drive the pace on this descent of Mont du Chat.
He didn't make any big moves on the climb itself, just rode at a rather steady pace. But remember last year, he took some time on Nairo Quintana at the Tour de France on a descent, when Quintana went for a water bottle over the top of a climb. And it looks like this could all come back together here. We do have some corners in the final few K. Road starting to flatten out somewhat. Now Richie Porte ahead of Aru in a 3rd position here. Fuglsang 2nd and Froome leading the way. Olivier Nazon, originally from the breakaway for AG2R, on the right-hand side just behind Contador. So no sign of Valverde himself, even though they're calling it the Valverde group. All right, so our group of 4 at the front starting to reconnect. 3K left to go. We have 2 90-degree corners inside the final 3K and 2 roundabouts for the riders to deal with. And then a sweeping left-hand turn inside the final K as well that leads into the finish. So it looks like these 4 could fight it out at the line, and there are time bonuses of 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3 across. And you have 4 of the overall contenders battling for 3 bonus spots here. And everybody but Porte needs the time as they come into this finishing town of Le Mans-Servolex.
Well, the 2 Astana riders, they need to make up the most time. Those guys are sitting right next to each other, separated only by 1 second. Jakob Fuglsang 1 second behind Fabio Aru, and Dan Martin's actually on the same time as that as well. Dan Martin, we haven't really seen a glimpse of, most likely in that Valverde group, somewhere with Contador.
And Chris Froome 37 seconds behind Richie Porte. Porte the best placed of the general classification contenders. And now this group of 4 may come to the line together. If that's the case, what do you like in a sprint?
Somewhere in between Jakob and Richie Porte. I mean, Richie is, a lot of times, especially when you see him tour down under, he's unbeatable with a little hill of a climb for the sprint. But, you know, on a flat sprint, especially since he's in Tour de France form with not as much power, I would probably say Jakob. But, you know, even Chris Froome is known to mad dog it at the finish line, especially the way he went down that descent. He obviously has some good form.
Froome sliding to the back. Port talking to Aru as he flicks the elbow for him to come through and take a pull. And there's again a look at the bonuses. Ooh. And now Fuglsang attacks from the back of the group. Just ahead of the 1K to go mark. That's that red kite in the distance.
Well, Jakob not wanting to wait for any kind of sprint. Maybe he was thinking that he lacked some kind of a sprint, going early, making sure that Chris Froome works for everything he's got to get here. Here's the group. Now there's finally Dan Martin, Bardet, and Alejandro Valverde right here.
So Martin, Alejandro Valverde, and Romain Bardet, the next group on the road. So this is the second group. And now Olivier Naizon is number 17 for AG2R, right behind Alberto Contador, number 41. So they're the third group now. These are the leaders coming around that roundabout inside the final K. Fuglsang has been caught, and now they spread out and wait for the sprint. Richie Porte, either way, is going to emerge as the big winner here. Not going to lose any time to his top rivals and will likely gain some time on a few of them. Second group led by Dan Martin, Alejandro Valverde right behind. And now here's Chris Froome opening up the sprint on the straightaway towards the line. Froome trying for those 10 seconds of bonus time for finishing first. Richie Porte pulling up along the barriers. Fuglsang on the right-hand side of the screen. It's Porte, Froome, Fuglsang, almost too close to call. Fabio Aru was fourth. But Porte, Froome, and Fuglsang spread across the road there at the line. Will take all 3 bonus seconds. I'd have to wait for the photo to see who was first out of the group.
I think that Richie Porte was easily the fastest man out of that group, but he looked like he got tied up a bit with Chris Froome trying to come on the right-hand side, right alongside those barriers.
Now these riders coming up next, losing time to the 4 that just finished in the battle for the overall. Valverde helping to lead that group. He is clearly the fastest man from these 3. Dan Martin trying to open it up. And Romain Bardet is there. Valverde starts his sprint and will lead them across the line, 5th, 6th, and 7th on the stage.
And here it looks like most like Alberto Contador and Naizon. Alberto looks like he got dropped on the descent, not willing to take much risk. And this Dauhine waiting for the Tour de France, it looks like.
So Contador, who started the day 35 seconds behind Richie Porte, will lose even more time in the battle for yellow. And another look from the overhead at the sprint for the win.
Now watch Richie Porte get tied up right here on the right-hand side, trying to come by. Chris Froome veers to the right, gets tied up right in between those barriers. Actually hit the barriers, give him a little nudge, let him know he's there. But Jakob did not have to slow down. Ooh, with a bike throw. Might be Jakob.
It looked like it from that perspective. This might give us the better angle here. I think Jakob by a hair.
And there you have it. Jakob by a tired width ahead of Richie Porte, Chris Froome right in the middle.
So Fuglsang, who started the day 1:14 behind Porte, will pick up 4 seconds of bonus time over Porte for finishing first. But the big news is, with all of this, Richie Porte will move into the yellow jersey as the overall leader of the race. You see the other results from riders coming in behind. Our top 3. So Jakob Fuglsang wins the stage. Richie Porte moves into the race lead. We will hear from both when we come back. Thomas de Hent spending his last day in yellow as the overall race leader. Figured he would lose it today, and he did, to Richie Porte. And this is the way that the finish played out. Porte was fast, but couldn't get by Froome on the inside.
You see him stop pedaling there for a second, probably even touch the brakes, but accelerating yet again. And then if you see him coming across the line and into the press, you see how much faster he was actually going than Jakob Fuglsang on the right-hand side right there. But Jakob had the beautiful bike throw right at the line, winning by just a tire width.
Went to a photo finish, but the 32-year-old Dane gets the victory. Believe it or not, his first ever World Tour win. Was the silver medalist in the road race at the Olympic Games in Rio a year ago. last won the overall at the Tour of Austria in 2012, not a World Tour event. So a huge day for Fuglsang as he beats out Froome and Port right at the finish of the first mountainous day at the Dauhine.
Jacob, what a success today, what a stage.
Yeah, it's been a lot of bad luck for our team this year. Finally it seemed that everything comes together and that we start to be competitive and really competitive. Luckily, it's now before the tour, and to go in Dauphine like this and on the first hard stage be there in front with two guys with two of the other favorites for the tour, and for Dauphine, it's of course really nice, and for me personally to win for the first time for Astana, it's a huge relief. It's a huge relief.
And as you said, that's the success of a team, of Fabio Aru and you, because you did the race together and you try together, you've won, but the success of a team today.
Yeah, for sure, the success of the team, not only Fabio and me, but also the guys who worked before we came to the climb, who kept us in position and did a really good job to make it as easy for us as possible. So also the days before we came to this stage, they have been there and protecting and helping. So it's a victory for the whole team, for sure.
Yeah, this is what the new overall looks like after the time bonuses were factored in and the gaps among the overall contenders. Richie Porte moves into yellow, leading Chris Froome by 39 seconds. Alberto Contador outside the top 5, trailing by 147. Romain Bardet, a big loser on the day, now 249 off the pace. Some of the Americans, including Andrew Talansky, 3.5 minutes or more now behind our overall leader. Richie Porte, a terrific season so far. Little bobble at Paris-Nice back in March, but a deserving leader here today.
For sure, I think he might be carrying this all the way through Sunday. As long as he keeps on riding like he did today, smart, stay protected by your team, he'll be just fine.
Showing terrific form as he rides into yellow.
Richie won a hell of a stage, a hell of a battle. Wow, the legs apparently responded well.
Yeah, I mean, our team were fantastic. The BMC Pro Team guys from kilometre zero basically on the front, and we didn't have much help there until the final with AG2R. So it's just nice to come through that stage and take the yellow jersey is an incredible feeling.
Especially because there were a lot of attacks from Aru, from Fuglsang, from Chris Froome as well.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of attacks there, but I think my team stayed calm, and I was happy to be able to come over the top there with just Froome and I and Naru in front with Jakob. So it was a good stage. You know, it was a crazy descent there in the end, but you know, I think I'm in a good place.
Yeah, and with a nice jersey on your shoulders, confirmation of the good form you had during the time trial.
I think so. I mean, it's nice to have the jersey, but I know the next 2 days are going to be super hard, but I feel up to it. I think we've got the team here to try and finish it off on Sunday.
And will he indeed finish it off on Sunday, Christian?
I mean, everything points to yes right now. And like he alluded to, as long as he stays with his team is fantastic. They're riding very strong. And this could easily be their Tour de France squad. So just be smart. Let your team do all the work.
Another big day in the mountains tomorrow for Christian Vandeveld. I'm Steve Schlanger. We'll see you then for Stage 7 at the Criterium du Dauphiné.